Welcome to the Relationships Inside Out podcast with Doctors Gregory Siebert and Kimberly Murray, licensed marriage and family therapists. Join them on this journey as they explore the ins and outs of relationships.
Well, welcome to Relationships Inside Out, where today's episode, we're going to be talking about performance anxiety.
This shows up in so many different parts of our lives, whether it's in our romantic partnerships, parenting, work, school, you name it, and it probably shows up.
Yeah, despite, the stage fright term that's been coined, it's not just getting on stage or athletes. I mean, it can happen in multiple contexts, as you had mentioned. I think it's important to talk about performance anxiety in this broad context because all of us experience it, but some of us don't recognize that we're experiencing it. I mean, I'm even talking about performance of, did my meal taste good tonight for the family that we had over? Even the small things on a day-to-day that elicit stress that we're probably not aware of.
Thinking about, company's coming over. Is my house clean enough?
Yeah.
Are my kids well-behaved enough? Are their outfits cute enough? To my car, right? It demonstrates something about me.
Yeah. Who are we performing for? Who are we performing
All the strangers we'll never talk to again. Here's what I tell people is if someone cares what your house looks like, what your car looks like, you probably don't want them in your inner circle anyway.
But part of it, I guess we're kind of getting at is this sense of approval from society. So we're performing in order to get some sort of approval or don't want to be rejected. So we want to make sure we put on a performance.
Or to be seen as competent or even valued or worthy, right? It can take a really deep role in our space of I have to perform well enough in order to be worthy to have my job, to be this parent, to have my parents appreciate me, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And the big part of this is our relationship with ourselves, is the meaning we put on that if we don't do well. Because if we think about performance anxiety, a lot of it is that fear of what's going to happen if I don't perform well. What happens if I make a mistake? What happens if I don't seem competent? And all of that inside our own psyche. What does that mean for us? I'm going to be seen as a failure. I mean, a lot of negative self-talk comes along with this.
And things that can combat that would be confidence or self-worth, internal validation rather than external validation. So validation for myself, not just from other people, right? Intrinsic versus extrinsic.
Wait, what?
I know.
What's very hard about that in terms of external and intrinsic validation is we have a culture where we're kind of raised and socialized on external validation. Think about our school, right? You're worthy based on an external grade or praise. There's not much taught. Or ranking. Yep.
Even sports, right?
Yeah.
Do you make varsity or JV? Ranking. Do you make the play? Do you make the team? Whatever it might be.
They're the lead in the school play.
Did I make it into the private school?
Yeah.
Did I make it into the club? Whatever it might be.
And there's not much for this internal kind of praise for ourselves and validation. This, again, our relationship with ourselves, what is the talk we're having? And it has to become more intentional because it's not really socialized well, unless you had really good parents that valued that as well and kind of modeled that.
I also think about like advertisements. Our culture is saturated in unrealistic advertisements or even propaganda. And we think we have to live up to that. When if we actually look at the research, say for women in body image, the ideal is a size 0 to size 2. The average woman is actually a size 12. Do we talk about that? Do we show that on advertisements? No, we show the size 0. And then every woman thinks, oh, I've got to be that body. You may not be able to. No matter what you do, you may never be able to. But we have this performance anxiety of, I've got to get there. I've got to look that way to be valued.
Yeah. It's again, what is the narrative that we're trying to portray? And do we have anxiety around what we have to do to get there? Like if I want to portray I'm competent and I'm giving a public speech, like what do I have to do to help make sure that if I make a mistake, I'm okay?
I think of this as pairing with imposter syndrome. This belief that we're an imposter. And I still feel this. So I've been a therapist for over a decade. And every day I'm like, I really should, like, I'm not qualified for this job. Or I'm not qualified to be a parent because I have this imposter syndrome that I am an imposter and somehow I'm getting away with it. And one day someone's going to discover I'm not competent and everything's going to crash back down.
And that's a big culprit to the performance anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
Because if someone finds out they're an imposter, right? And I have that as well. Again, 10 years more in therapy and still question ourselves, which part of it, there's some health to it because you want to continue to grow and better ourselves. It's to the point where it becomes debilitating, right? And there's, of course, physiological symptoms we're all aware of. Like we talk about the butterflies, the clammy hands, the heart rate, we're more tense, maybe the jaw's tight. Negative self-talk is a big one. We're very critical of ourselves.
Might not have clarity of thought.
Yep.
Clarity of speech. We might start to stutter or mumble or whatever it might be.
Very dry mouth. I get that a lot.
And it comes up in ways that we wouldn't even think about it. So what are some of the ways you see it come up with your clients or in your space?
The bedroom.
Yeah.
That's a big one. And there's just a lot of narratives around performance from the culture, right? So there's the narratives we have for ourselves based on some expectation that's largely probably influenced from like family or some social stuff. And then there's also just like, there is a message around in our society around what the bedroom performance is supposed to look like. Look at all the movies, right? They climax together. It lasts a long time.
People talk about porn and I'm like, people get off porn. This is my soapbox, but porn, by and large, not always, gives us an unrealistic expectation of what sexual performance should look like.
Yeah.
And it kills intimacy because when we have performance anxiety around sex, around intimacy, we may avoid it. So we kind of push our partner away. We may not actually enjoy it because we're so in our head about what does my body look like in this light? Am I doing it right? Am I giving enough to my partner? Is this the right position?
Yeah.
Whatever it might be.
And the males, am I lasting long enough? Am I pleasing my partner? And
the sounds I'm making, are they okay? Are they judging me?
Do I smell? A lot of performance anxiety around that. And a lot of it's the expectations. The expectations of self, however they're shaped, however that narrative is shaped, working with that is really important. Because like, for example, I think the average for men lasting like 2-3 minutes. Movies is like hours, all night, multiple times, erections on demand. It's amazing.
And they can have multiple orgasms in a row.
No smells, no farting, nothing.
And that's not real, people.
Yeah.
Some women can climax back to back, but by and large, men need breaks in between. It's not like one after another.
Yeah. It needs time to regenerate, right? So that's a big one that comes up. Work performance is another one.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of times the idea of I need to perform and do this, or I'm going to be seen as a failure or not good enough. And again, it's not just how you feel about yourself. You're probably getting messages like that too in the work, right? Like that's probably true. We don't have necessarily control over those unless you remove yourself from that or have a conversation with that individual or individuals, depending if you have some sense of control. But by and large, it's what can we do for ourselves and our own psyche and find evidence. This goes back to some of the things we've talked about challenging our negative thoughts. Find evidence against to provide balance in that perspective of I'm good in this area, in that area.
With the work one, I think about the difference between our sex, so male, female. I think about the difference between race, right? How I have to perform, the clothes I have to wear, the way I have to present is impacted by some of those factors that we can't even help within ourselves.
Yeah. The cultural narratives.
Oh, yeah. So even for women who are in leadership, right? I want to be seen as strong and being able to hold my own. But if I do that too much, I'm going to be seen as a bitch.
Yep.
Whereas men, you're a leader, right? He's a boss. Women don't get that. And so I have to walk this really fine line of how do I be a boss, but also be really sensitive and tender and maybe a little bit quieter. And it becomes this dance.
Yeah.
Same with minorities. I have a couple clients who identify as minorities. And one I was talking to most recently, and she was talking about this dance within her job of, I see that there's problems happening in my workplace, but how do I bring them up? Because my voice doesn't matter the same, or my job's more at risk. They already see me as incompetent because English is my second language. And it's just this really interesting dynamic that she has to face. That for me, like as a white female, that part I wouldn't think of. The female part, sure. But performance anxiety can really vary based on so many different factors. Some we don't even think about.
Yeah. Like as you're talking about one's position in society, right? Relative and the different narratives or messages that they're receiving based on their position. Yeah. Yeah. It's a big problem that we just kind of, I think, accept. A lot of us are just like, oh, I have performance anxiety, but there's actually stuff we can do about it.
And it's not great for our health long term.
You mean sitting there anxious?
Oh, it's killer. It's killer to our cardiovascular system, our neurological well-being. Oh, it's killer. But with the job thing, even being able to say, like, when people ask, what do you do for work? And I say, oh, I'm a stay-at-home mom. But that period of my life, that was a very vulnerable period because people would be like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or you don't work? You just stay at home? Nope, just stay at home. Right. And for different people who work in different careers, feeling shy about saying what that is because it doesn't adhere to that performance that we would think of. I have to be a lawyer or whatever it might be. One of the big wigs.
And I love to explore with clients, what is the narrative that you were told around what performance means? Yeah. And I kind of want to get into the parenting piece here.
Yeah.
What are the messages parents are giving their children about the importance of performance? And I think about the parents on the sidelines, on the side of the ring, yelling at their kid to perform because for them, it's a reflection of them as a parent. So do you have anything that you want?
So my daughter does an activity here local to us, and I'll leave their business out, but it is, she goes once a week and it is actually to build confidence. They do public speaking. It is to build athletic ability and coordination, as well as teamwork, cooperation, good sportsmanship. And they were doing races during one of her classes.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah. And my daughter and her friend won the sled race. Cool, right? We try to teach her to be a good sport, whether she's winning or losing. Another kiddo came in third, and their coach said, oh, I didn't see who won. Can someone tell me who won? And the mom of the other team who got third immediately jumped up and said, oh, it was mine. My daughter won. And my daughter spoke up and said, actually, I think we won. Gentle and sweet. But this mom was like, no, it was mine. And it just, to me, demonstrated that performance anxiety. If my kid has to be, quote unquote, the best. But what does that mean, right? In that household, that kiddo's learning, I've got to be number one every time.
To be loved.
And if I'm not number one, we're going to lie about it. We're going to make it up. We're going to probably have some negative dialogue about it. But it's most certainly not going to be acceptable to be anything other than number one. It's just a fascinating dynamic to witness.
Yeah.
But it comes up all the time in parenting.
I would say that's probably the more common narrative that comes up when my clients and I explore what is driving this performance anxiety. And they've learned that this is their value.
Yeah.
Is I have to perform and do well to make my parents proud.
Whereas parents, I have to push my kid to perform well to be a quote unquote proud parent.
And that's a narrative in itself that's influencing parents, which we'll be talking about in a future episode.
It's just fascinating, right? With kids in 5-6 sports, and they've got to be elite. And these kids that at 5 years old are traveling on dance teams all over the country already, right? They don't get a chance to slow down and just enjoy the process. It is simply the end goal. Again, that performance piece. It's not, did I learn something? Did I challenge my body? It's, did I win? Did I get straight A's? Did I get the award at school for best student?
Yeah. And there's a big focus on the outcome of this.
Yes.
This is where in performance anxiety, a lot of people are focused on the outcome, which brings anxiety in itself. I need to lose weight. I need to go to the gym and just get in shape. It's never really learning how to appreciate the process. And so performance becomes this black and white perspective. I either have done this probably more often than not unrealistic goal or expectation, or I'm a failure. Right. Part of that narrative, whether they learn as a childhood or society or a mixture of both, or the intergenerational transmission of that message. Because I'm sure the parents didn't just like come out on their own. They probably learned it as well from their parents and so forth. But that black and white perspective is I either did or didn't. And that's not really a good perspective or a healthy perspective to have when we're looking at performance. What are ways that you did well in there? What are ways that you learned from that? What did you gain from that experience about yourself that you can build upon? And finding ways that you've, again, learned, gained, achieved something, and not the outcome as being the only thing that can be achieved.
How can it motivate you to do something different or better? How can we appreciate people who did better than we did?
Oh, that one's hard.
Ooh, it's a tough one. But we as parents set the stage for our kids to learn that. It's just, it's fascinating how it can go through different generations, that transgenerational patterning. of we have to be elite, we have to be the best, we have to dress a certain way, our physique has to be a certain way, our income has to be a certain way. Otherwise, it's failure. It's either winning or failure. There's no room for that middle ground.
Yeah. You represent our family or group, right? Depending on the culture. And you have to make us proud. And oftentimes it's performance, right? School grades, sports, doing very well. Maybe a combination of both. You have to have a great job. I look at some cultures where you only can be a medical doctor or you're a failure, right? Here, talk about performance anxiety. My goodness.
And what if you don't want to be? Now I'm striving to perform in a way that not only probably isn't something that's attainable for me, but something I don't want, right? And to have to wear that mask of being someone rather than being your authentic self is exhausting.
Yeah. And to be fair, in terms of not to beat our parents up for the messages if we receive that, because they're also a product of the culture at their time, at that given point in time. And a lot of it's similar, right? In terms of you better be good or you're not good enough. So just kind of evaluating it objectively as possible. Like, where is this coming from? And working to change that narrative for yourself. I'm thinking about ways to help improve performance anxiety.
I'm thinking about other places that this even shows up. We think about even childbirth or with infants, right? Women put on their full makeup and I've got to look good for my birth pictures. You are birthing a human from your vagina. It is not a glamorous moment. I'm here to tell you, as someone who's birthed a couple, it's not a glamorous moment, but we want like glamour shots while we're giving birth, and we don't want any chins to show, and we don't want to poop while we're giving birth. And it takes away from women's experiences often.
Yeah. You want a fan in the room to blow the hair while you're getting that photo, holding your baby.
It's exhausting. So rather than living in our natural state of birth, we're now performing. What if I make a sound that's weird? Much like sex. What if I poop or pee or puke or something? Is my partner be grossed out? I've had partners come in where he'll say, I'll be in the room and I'll hold her hand, but I'm not going down south. I don't need to see that. The message that sends to the wife is, you better perform well. And that's gross. And it just it kills me, but we see it show up there.
Yeah.
Even after baby's out, am I nursing correctly? And if I'm not, do I ask for help or do I suffer through? Do I have to act like I know how to change a diaper when I've never changed one before? Or how to hold a baby? We don't talk about this. And then it makes moms and dads sometimes incredibly anxious. And then everywhere we go, our baby's got to have the cutest clothes and a bow on. No, they're going to be in onesies because they're going to shit their pants and inevitably it's going to blow out on their clothes. We have this belief that our kids are an extension of us and this have to look perfect. We have to be perfect. And it's exhausting.
And part of that belief is us as a society evaluate people that we see a kid crying in a store. What do we think immediately? Not a good parent.
And we turn our heads and we look at them with judgment.
Yeah. I don't know if I go that far.
Oh, I'll tell you all the time. I have a 2-year-old and people will turn their heads and look at you like, what is happening?
So as a society, we're sending this message too. And it goes back to this for me, again, going back to how do we help maybe help this a little bit, reduce it a little bit. And what we do have control over is ourselves.
100%.
And the messages we're willing to receive or take on or live. And so I think an important question is, who are you performing for and why? Who?
If I want to do better at my job, it's because I want to be a better therapist, not because I want my husband or someone else to think something of me. At least that's the goal.
But oftentimes as therapists, whether we're better or not is depicted on how clients report. That's right. So there's an external kind of validation there, which it can be dangerous for us, right? Hence where imposter syndrome comes in. And anytime we put our performance or outcome based on somebody else is always dangerous because it's contingent upon them, and people are humans and that's not their job.
And some days you're going to be off your game. Maybe you are an incredible, whatever, fill in the blank for your job, an incredible technician or banker or whatever. Some days you're not going to be. Yes, parent. Some days you might yell. Some days you might cry. You might drop the ball. You might not have the coolest activity for your kid that day. It's okay. Yeah. But can we give ourselves permission for that to be okay? Can we start to move away from, is my house clean enough? Am I performing well enough to, this is good enough because actually I want to focus on the fun I'm going to have and the memories I'm going to create instead of how organized my space is.
And this is kind of touching on self-compassion.
Yes.
Giving ourselves grace. How do we have self-compassion for ourselves?
Grace over guilt.
In order to be okay that we are human, and just because we're not perfect 100% of the time, or we're performing to our best 100% of the time, that we're not good enough.
And what does best mean? Does best mean perfection, or does best mean, hey, I've got like limited energy today, but I'm going to use that limited energy to the best of my ability. And that's my best for the day. My best tomorrow might be different.
And that's subjective. And part of that's going to be influenced by that narrative of what best has to be in order to feel X, right? Good enough, or worthy enough, or competent enough. So that self-compassion, I think, goes a long way in outperformance anxiety, of giving yourself a break. And just because you feel anxiety does not mean you're not competent at whatever it is you're doing. We're humans. We feel anxiety.
And sometimes, like you said, it can be helpful so long as it isn't debilitating, dominating our space, or limiting what opportunities we might take. Another big one here for me, I'm going to say it, boundaries, right? If we have people that make us feel.
Wait, what?
Oh God, I hate that phrase.
It's so hard.
I just said it. That pull out our insecure parts of ourselves and say things that put us down or lead us into a place of feeling like we have to perform. Maybe we take space from them, or we set the hard boundary of, I don't appreciate that you spoke to me that way. I will not tolerate that. Or if you continue to talk to me that way, I'm going to hang up the phone. It's a hard boundary to set, but we want people in our space that love us no matter how messy we are, no matter how cool our job is or our car is, and love us just where we're at this moment.
Yeah, which is a hard ask.
It is a hard ask.
Right.
And it can be pivotal in your mental health.
Yeah. So we don't feel like we're constantly performing for people, and why. And that's where the reflection piece comes again for me, is who we're performing for and why. Does it even matter? My wife, she can cook dinner for a group of people and not even care anyone's feedback. I cook just for her. And I'm like, does it taste okay? Is everything well?
And you're going to ask 15 times.
15 times, 20 times.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Does it need anything? And so it's just reflecting myself, like, why do I need that performance? What does it mean about me if it isn't that good? And there's a lot of overlap with the perfectionism piece here too, right? Because I think perfectionism is a product of needing to make sure that we're good enough in that performance, right?
As parents, we set our kids up for this. So how I talk to my kids about their performance either sets them up for performance anxiety or helps to kind of reduce it, right? So if I'm telling my daughter, oh, you didn't win, man, next time we got to win. It's a different conversation than, I love that you hustled, or great teamwork. You slapped your, like the activity she does, you slapped your teammate's hand every time. You were so encouraging to your partner. Great job, hun. That's an entirely different dialogue, because now I'm putting emphasis on effort and teamwork and camaraderie rather than did I perform the outcome?
Yeah. Performance versus outcome, right?
Yeah. Even emotions. No, you can't be angry. You can't show you're sad. Go up to your room. If you're gonna be angry, go to your room. It's telling her that she's not performing in the way I want, which would be a happy, compliant child. Instead, switching it to, I can see you're angry. Would you like a hug?
Yeah.
How can I support you, hun? What do you need to get through this moment? Wow, that was a really tough loss. Okay. And how can we cheer on our teammate? What do you think you did well? Right? Those are entirely different conversations than outcome. Or parents, the word that makes me cringe. I'm disappointed.
Oh my goodness.
Sucker punch is what that is. Drop that from your vocabulary if you're a parent.
Yeah.
Nothing tells a kid more about performance anxiety than that sentence right there.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, again, I'm just thinking as we're talking, like, where does that come from? And like, for me, growing up with my parents earlier on, I played sports, didn't have any anxiety around it. As soon as I got into like middle school and high school, and the performance became about what I was wearing. And then it became in the military, and then academia, and it just kind of exacerbated.
Oh, academia.
Because I had very forgiving parents. They loved me for who I was, right? I got lucky in that realm. And so I'm like, mine didn't come from that narrative, but I had a cultural narrative in different small contexts that we've mentioned. And And so reflecting back, okay, well, that's going to tell me who I'm performing for. What's the message I received from there? Okay, what does that mean? And just trying to take that apart and really being objective with yourself of like, does that even matter to me anymore?
Does someone's feedback matter? Sometimes feedback is important, but is it from someone who knows what they're talking about? From someone who might value their perspective? From someone who is saying it out of compassion and love and encouragement, or from someone who's being critical and mean?
Yeah. And we often hear it from the people who are critical and mean because they feel it necessary to voice their opinions more often.
Social media, friends. I encourage my daughter with her friend groups to really pick friends, not based on like who's got the biggest group or the coolest coat or whatever, but who makes you feel good. If someone doesn't make you feel good, don't spend time with them. Don't exclude them. Like, we're not trying to be exclusionary either, but you get to actively choose who's in your space. Right. And that shows up. We've worked really hard with our 5-year-old around this, and it shows up now in the way she's a big sister. She encourages her sister. She says, like, Skylar, great job, or good try on the potty, or whatever it might be. And I love seeing that new pattern that's forming for them that I didn't grow up with. And it's really cool to watch.
Yeah, I love that. So let's talk about ways in which to reduce. We've kind of peppered them in, but let's kind of focus on that specifically. I know we've been jumping around just because there's just so much to this. Let's focus on what are ways in which people can help. Of course, there's the therapy, right? Acceptance, commitment therapy. There's cognitive behavioral therapy. There's self-compassion. There's narrative therapy. There's a lot of different therapies if you wanted to go to a therapist and work on this stuff too. But there's a lot of techniques from those models that also can help. And we've talked a little bit about one where you challenge those thoughts. Those negative thoughts I have about myself, like worst case scenario, I'm going to give a talk, I'm going to mess up, challenge that.
The anxiety work. With a CBT thought log or mindfulness, working with our anxiety. You're never going to be without anxiety or you wouldn't get out of bed, right? Anxiety moves us forward. But how do we, if you think of a bell curve, how do we stay in that optimal range of anxiety for performance rather than on either side?
Yeah. Where there's like none or like exceptional.
Yep.
And accepting that and being okay with that and where you're at and being your best self. Again, going back to the self-compassion piece, giving yourself grace. And for me, I think looking at your anxiety and that part of yourself that you don't feel is performing well is exactly that, a part of yourself. It's not your whole self. Even if you didn't perform well at something, that's just a part of me. That's not my whole identity.
And everybody makes mistakes. Everyone.
Yeah.
Even the most wealthy, the most popular make mistakes. It is another tool is again, back to that parenting piece, really talking about the process and encouraging what went well. We can talk about what we want to do better, but not focusing on the end game and did I win every time? It's good try, good effort, nice teamwork, things like this.
Yeah. Other ways are the mindfulness piece you brought up. We can calm kind of just our physiological response just by being present, whether you're focusing on the things you see, hear, smell, taste, if you can, taking like the box breathing or taking slow breaths in your nose for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds to reoxygenate yourself, and then breathing out your mouth for 8. Little simple things that continue to do it. And it's not just like we do this once and I feel a miracle. Sometimes I have to do it 20 times.
It takes time. The same grace I encourage you to give your kids and talk about effort, I also encourage you to give yourself. Goes to that self-compassion, self-talk, but really focusing on that intrinsic, internal motivation and validation.
Yeah.
Was I as good as so-and-so? No, but I felt good about my performance. It's not a comparison. I get to feel good about myself, good about how that project turned out, about my parent, whatever, it doesn't matter. Regardless of what other people think.
And that comes down to reshaping expectations for self, for others, and hopefully yourself. What are your expectations for yourself that you can be happy with and look back on, and being very honest with yourself of like, okay, that's unrealistic. Like, I'm not going to go up there and give this speech. Everyone gets up and starts applauding me.
What?
I'm not going to go play a hockey game and score like 7 goals and everyone's just going to be, carrying me on their shoulders.
Right.
Just being realistic with yourself and acknowledging perfectionism if it comes up. and resetting your expectations and finding a place that you can be okay with, to relieve some of the anxiety of like, you know what, I don't have to do that. I talk about that performance of like, I need to lose weight. I need to go get in shape. What do you want to go do today that you can accomplish that's measurable and realistic, that reduce anxiety? If I go to the gym, it helps me relax.
Yeah.
Your goal today is just for relax. That takes
and
so
it's
much pressure.
One thing. It's not change my diet, go to the gym, start my water, all the things all at one time.
Yeah.
Take your time.
Yeah.
That's true with anything, right? There's some preparation, some grace in the process. Give ourselves room, right? Whatever it is that we're trying to perform for, it probably isn't going to happen instantly either.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do want to get to a certain goal, try not to judge yourself along the way as you make mistakes or trial and error or take some steps forward and backward. Give yourself room to learn along the process, to fine tune along the process.
Especially because if you have this like overarching conceptual goal that's just overwhelming, like I need to lose weight, that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So shifting the expectation of like, I'm just going to go and find a way to enjoy myself in a process that I know could get me to that goal long term.
Sure.
But let's just enjoy ourselves. Let's go to the gym and I'm going to swim. I'm going to just walk on the treadmill today. I'm going to have compassion for myself that I'm even going.
I'm going to eat a vegetable today.
No, thanks. What's up?
It's hard. Performance anxiety is normal and natural. When it becomes debilitating or starts limiting your opportunities, start taking on some of these tools.
Mm-hmm.
Go see a therapist. Something, because as much as our culture wants you to believe it, it does not have to be your norm.
Yeah.
In fact, it's not great on our body if it is. Get that support.
And for me, I mean, I think performance anxiety is one of my biggest anxieties for myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big one for me. And that's why I like this topic that we're talking about. Because for me, I'm trying a lot of the stuff that we're doing. And it does work and it's helped. That's how I've been able to defend a dissertation, to teach college, university classes to like master level students and to, present research at conferences with other experts around, by doing these very things. So like, we're not telling you them because they sound good and they come from books. Like we're actually trying them.
And we actually struggle with it too.
Yeah. Oh, it's part of being human, but we don't want it to be debilitating because just take my example, like what I just talked about, my experience. If I wasn't able to do any of that, where would my career be and where would I be?
Mm-hmm. Very stagnant, right? If we let it hold us back, it holds us back, obviously, but it also affirms our narrative. I can't do it because I'm never trying something new. So I never get to push myself. And so I knew I couldn't do it. See, didn't do it.
Yeah. Are you missing out on anything because of this? And that's a question too. I think that as we're talking about it is, am I missing out on something because of my performance anxiety in part of the evaluation of yourself and its role?
Well, this has been Relationships Inside Out, where we talked about performance anxiety. It is something that happens sometimes daily for people, and yet it doesn't have to be debilitating. It doesn't have to be our norm. As always, if anyone has any questions, topic suggestions, concerns, feel free to email us at relationshipsinsideout@gmail.com. Look forward to chatting with you next time.
Thanks.